it's time to ask the question, will COVID survive Ukraine? And to be honest, the forecasts aren't looking good, and this is more in terms of the COVID narratives.
Oh no, not my COVID narratives.
I know, they've all fallen away. I'm naked now. No, and this is actually going to be a good way of looking more into more in depth at what you have and what you and now other people have dubbed the George Floyd effect, where it seems that most people have taken the one thing that they were very angry about, that this is the hill I'm going to die on, and
I've seen one video on YouTube.
Yes, and now I have hopped over to the next hill along that I am going to die on. But this is just a reminder for everybody that the elites and the ruling class are probably going to use the events in Ukraine to try and distract everybody from the fact that we have been tyrannized for 2 years, and distract everybody from the fact that just a week ago, just a week and a half ago, the thing that was on everybody's minds was the Canadian trucker protest, which has suddenly and very conveniently vanished from mainstream discourse. So just as an update on some of the things that are going on regarding COVID, the CDC has updated its masking guidelines in America, which is very convenient for people. Even California might be experiencing a little taste of that freedom, which they have not been very used to for a while. So they announced new guidance on face masks as the US continues its shift in strategy towards COVID-19. The CDC will consult new metrics to determine whether a community should enforce indoor masking, looking at COVID-19 hospital admissions, overall hospital capacity, and new COVID-19 cases as the deciding factors. The results: currently, only about 28% of people in the US live in a county where they'd be recommended to wear a mask indoors, per the CDC's new metrics. The universal masking recommendations for schools have been dropped as well. Yes, which is a very good thing. We're finally getting to make our own decisions. They didn't really, as far as I can tell, seem to be... If I'm allowed to say that. Am I allowed to say that?
I think with a gun to my head from YouTube, I have to say this. Masks play a role in dealing with the coronavirus. It's literally written, like what you must say as a guideline. So that's that.
Well,
Everything
there we
else
go.
We'll take from the
Bureaucracy
CDC.
achieved.
Everything else we'll take from the CDC because that's also halal.
Yes. Previously, case counts were used as the sole measuring stick for Americans masking up. Now, given the vaccine and everything, waves of infection that come through Omicron and Delta variants resulted in mostly mild symptoms that didn't require hospitalizations, and also led to a lot of natural immunity, because we're allowed to talk about that again now, spreading throughout the country. So everything's looking all right. You can even, if you move along, check out the CDC guidelines for yourself if you're interested, just to see that. I think it's not that there's anything specific in there, it's just that a lot of stuff has been taken out. But most people aren't paying attention to this stuff anymore because of Ukraine. And we've had people who've kind of taken a notice of this. Mark Dolan saying, dreadful human though he is, fair play to old Vlad for ending the pandemic. Thanks for that, Putin, doing a favour. It is a good point that this pandemic is now looking a bit small news. You even mentioned the other day that when people are trying to force the COVID narrative into this, it seems a little bit misplaced, like this one that you pointed out.
Also, sorry for a minute, but it's just, remember how COVID is probably and almost certainly killed more people than the war in Ukraine as well. But when there is a war or something like that, all Black Lives Matter riots, remember, it all disappears.
Yep, that's the thing. Well, that's an interesting thing we've got as well, is the protests, the government-approved protests, don't seem to have much of a mask restriction on them. I'll just say that. But yeah, this one that you pointed out the other day, a lot of people in Ukraine crowding together inside, but only 35% of them have been vaccinated and less than 2% boosted. And this did not get a great response. If you scroll down, I think libs of TikTok have the best response, which is just the frog of shame. If the frog of shame gets more likes than the original tweet, then you really suck. And it did.
What did Miles say?
Great ratio. Just scroll down so...
A man who is in Ukraine.
Yes, Miles just put, nobody cares.
I'm in a bunker right now, losers.
Yeah, missile strikes, I sleep. Sheltering while unvaccinated, I awake. Yeah, the whole thing just seems completely pointless, where it's just sort of like, what we need to do is we need to segregate the bomb shelters so that those in the unvaccinated don't give everybody else the sniffles.
Well, no, we have COVID passes. Only the vaccinated are allowed in. If you did not get vaccinated, clearly you wanted to die, so out in the bombs with you.
That's the only that's the only solution that we have to this. And there is talk about the vaccination rates, but there's also the talk about Ukrainians fleeing and becoming refugees, which seems to be interesting, seeing as so many of them will be flagrantly just
Anti-vaxxers?
Anti-vax. Most of them surely won't be vaccinated if only a third of the country is vaccinated.
Remember, that makes you an anti-vaxxer. So.
It really does. So we're going to have an influx of anti-vaxxers into Western countries, and all of a sudden, the ruling classes seem perfectly fine with this.
We don't care.
Yes, while Ukraine is under attack by Russia, Ukraine's civilian population is also under siege from the coronavirus, a situation only likely to worsen, which just... priorities, mate.
Shut up.
Priorities. I mean, come on.
Why are we accepting all these refugees from an active war? What do you think?
I don't know, man. The fighting in Ukraine's east is forcing a mass migration to the west that is crowding mass transit centres and trains and jamming roads. Video images of the large numbers of Ukrainians on the move show understandably few signs of face coverings, even as the county is just getting past a record high point in its infection rate.
I love the idea that Mr. Hassan here is going to go down.
What is it with Hassans? I swear to God.
No, but Mr. Hassan is like, yes, we must accept refugees from the Middle East, presumably. And then he gets to the women and children fleeing from Ukraine to Slovakia or Hungary, and he's stood there just pushing them back, going, no, you're all anti-vaxxers.
Away! He's just got a bar. He's like, no. I mean, good
Whereas
God.
These Syrian children can come all they want.
Yeah, only about 1/3 of Ukraine's 44 million people are fully inoculated against the coronavirus. And then they talk about Russia, despite being one of the first countries to develop and approve a coronavirus vaccine, has fully vaccinated only half of its population, according to Our World in Data Project. It's also dealing with an Omicron surge, recording an average of 160,000 new cases over the last 7 days, or 111 cases per 100,000 people. So honestly, with all that going on, it's a wonder they could muster the manpower for this invasion. I mean, Putin, don't you understand? There's a pandemic going on, man.
Soldiers could be hurt.
Yeah, what if they sneeze on each other? What if someone sneezes in a bullet wound? What happens then?
COVID mutates and makes bullets.
I don't know, man. You turn into a monster from The Thing, maybe. And yeah, obviously there are all of the refugees being welcome over here, and as long as they're just coming over here for the duration of the conflict, obviously if they can go to neighbouring countries, which are much closer by.
Again, I am very skeptical. Sorry, I interrupted because
Yeah,
you are saying
go
exactly
for it.
It is, which is if it's nearby, that's ideal. That's cheapest. We can save the most people. You can already see Canada can expect refugees. Why?
Yeah.
Why? It's the money you're spending on those plane trips could be spent housing people in Slovakia.
Canada is thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
There's an ocean.
Send money to Poland, not to Canadian Air.
Yeah. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Canadian government said it's prioritising immigration applications for Ukrainians. Prime Minister Trudeau said the federal government is urgently issuing travel documents for affected Canadians' permanent residents as well as their immediate family members. But isn't this interesting? Canada, just the other week, pretty hard line on unvaxxed people. But now, all these unvaxxed Ukrainians come in, please. We need to accept you so that presumably we can prevent you from getting a job and keep you, and then put you in prison for being unvaccinated, maybe?
So we had these 90% vaccinated truckers there for Bowden, but the 34% vaccinated women and children from Ukraine. That's okay. But it's also the aspect, again, of just if you're Ukrainian, do you think it's going to be easier to speak Polish or English? Do you think it's going to be easier to get a job in Poland or England?
I have a good idea of which.
Who could we save with the money?
But you mentioned the whole George Floyd effect, and it is interesting because this is just a great example of it, where just a few weeks ago it was COVID was the thing on everybody's tongues, and now it's Ukraine, and you can't have space in your tiny wickle brains. Kamala Harris, she knows how small your wickle brains are.
Big country, small country.
Big country, small country. You can't have space in your tiny brains for two things at the same time. Therefore, you have to focus on Ukraine. And if you talk about anything other than Ukraine right now, you're pro-Putin and you're trying to destroy the West and let Ukrainians die. And this is just Lauren Boeberts had a great example of this, where she was pointing out that, hey, you know, Ukraine's bad, but there was some pretty sketchy stuff going on in Canada. You know, they might have done some things like hack people's accounts, freeze people's accounts, hack people who were trying to donate to these peaceful protests. And then they go, no.
You know, those peaceful protesters in St. Petersburg and Moscow? They're all being arrested, beaten, have their bank accounts frozen for protesting against the war.
This sounds a little bit familiar.
Yeah.
I know, but that's over there. It's fine when it's over here.
Both of them are bad.
Yeah, Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert was condemned for comparing the Russian invasion of Ukraine to the clearing of a truckers' protest in Ottawa, saying we also have neighbours to the north who need freedom and who need to be liberated, which I think is a pretty uncontroversial statement when Trudeau has been acting as such a tyrannical leader for the past few months. But many in Canada and the US reacted to Boebert's comments with anger. Bruce Heyman, who was US ambassador to Canada under Barack Obama, said the Congresswoman's remarks were reckless, dangerous, and crossed every line of diplomacy and decency. Boebert would have been expelled from the Republican Party before Trump, but is now the darling of CPAC. Canada is our best friend, best trading partner, closest ally, and should be treated as such. So who cares if there's a few human rights violations going on? We're getting all our maple syrup from there. I can't I can't go without me syrup, Lauren.
It's like Saudi Arabia. Like if the Trudeau decided he would institute public executions like the Saudis, they'd be like, well, we've got to have that maple syrup flow. Like the oil. We'll just accept it. We need the oil. We need the maple syrup.
You know, if they're imprisoning people without charges or anything, oh well, I'm hungry, damn it. And there's also the question...
Americans are like, our breakfast can't survive without maple syrup.
I know. But do you think that somebody like that hacker who hacked Give, Send, Go, Kurtner, and released all the names of the donors who were donating to the trucker protest, do you think he's going to be doing any hacking to help the people of Ukraine? Do you think he's going to be trying to bring down the Russian systems? No. No, because of course he isn't, because this isn't going to align with certain progressive things. The only thing that the progressives have to do in regards to Ukraine is put the little flag in the bio, make a nice little virtue signal tweet, and go, I support the people of Ukraine, and then just leave it alone. And just every so often get offended at people like Lauren Boebert for saying, we've got our own problems over here, remember?
Yeah, I mean, these kind of people's lives were... put on a mask, and it was BLM, then mass some more, now Ukraine flag, and then God knows what it'll be in a few months.
They've changed out the brain. They've changed out the brain chip to take us back to the NPC memes. Here is a nice visualization of what's been going on. Scroll down. I don't care so much about the text there. Yep, CNN, MSNBC, and Twitter. COVID, Ukraine. Still angry.
And again, this doesn't apply to anyone in the East or in Ukraine, of course.
No, of course not.
Taking it seriously. We're talking about those Western NPCs.
Yes, and there are bloody plenty of them. And just like that, with the simple flick of the switch, protests are allowed in Canada again.
Just like the BLM ones.
Look at all these shockingly unmasked people. It is very interesting how all of a sudden protest is allowed when it's a government-sponsored protest. Just take... Yeah, here. You see that woman, the short woman at the front?
Yeah.
That's Chrystia Freeland, the Prime Minister, I should say, of Canada, Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, the woman who was talking about freezing bank accounts for the protesters. But when it's something I support, I'm going to be right there on the front lines waving that flag.
Also, I get this event as a form of solidarity and all that. You know, you can agree with that. But as a protest, when the government already agrees with the protest, it's kind of moot in that regard. Like when you saw them protesting BLM, and it was like, you've got the Prime Minister taking a knee. That doesn't make sense as a protest then.
That's the thing. They suspend the rules when it's something that they already support or know will be politically expedient for them or good optically. And people are still trying to talk about Canada, because I think it is a good reminder just to keep saying this. This was only like a week and a half ago that people were being persecuted in Canada for trying to protect their freedoms. But in the David Raboy sense, when it's somebody else's freedoms who are being stepped on...
Someone else's nationalism.
Yeah, someone else's nationalism, somebody else's freedoms, then we're all in support because we're liberals over here. Yeah, people pointed out... There's like, I think this is one of the most recent articles I could even see related to it, because of the fact that so many people, all the news articles are just all being overtaken by Ukrainian coverage, talking about class rage behind Trudeau's trucker emergency, the separation between the ruling classes and those people who were on the ground. The class dimension evident from the demeaning and charged language used by politicians and journalists in referring to the protesters, and now in regards to anybody who has a even remotely nuanced take on the Ukrainian conflict. Despised by members of the Canadian elite who are often blissfully unaware of their own privilege, protesters were considered blue-collar outcasts from the hinterland, presumptively racist and small-minded. But Ukraine, the elites can get behind that, make themselves look good and empathetic, care towards your own citizens. We don't need it. And here's one of the most...
I just see in the chat, someone's mentioned honk for Ukraine. That could be a smart move.
There you go. There you go. Truckers. That's genius.
Matt, this is a Ukraine protest. Bonk, bonk.
Yep. Honk, honk. We need Trudeau to know how much we support Ukraine. Let's park back up outside Parliament, boys.
What's he going to do? Have your stormtroopers come back in and beat you up for defending Ukraine?
Oh, yeah. John's got it there. Honk for Ukraine. But one of the most ridiculous takes I've seen regarding this, move along, John. This got 72,000 likes. Have you noticed that none of the anti-Trudeau hashtags have trended since Russia turned off Twitter? Huh? I know. Do you really believe that if the Russian hackers were such geniuses that they've coordinated everything that's gone wrong in the West, that just turning off Twitter would stop them?
Have you heard of a VPN? I think the Internet Research Agency might be able to afford NordVPN.
If I don't like something, it must have been Russia. And the fact that everybody has been distracted from the Canadian protest and turned straight over onto the Ukrainian issue means that I'm proven right. If I don't like it, it's Russia. 72,000 likes. I despair.
Flag in the bio.
Flag in the bio, yes. I absolutely despair. And another reminder that there are people still being persecuted because of the I almost said communist, the Canadian regime, such as one of the convoy organisers, Tamara Leach, who wants out of jail but has had her bail denied. One of the leaders that occupied downtown of the protests, that occupied downtown Ottawa, was in court on Wednesday hoping to overturn an earlier judicial decision that she be held without bail until her trial on the charges of counselling to commit the offence of mischief and committing mischief. So you're a domestic insurrectionist terrorist who's been going around and committing terrible, terrible mischief. Canada, you are not a serious country, my God.
She was out in Ottawa, up to no good. A couple of guys.
Like she was the Grinch or something. Going around, you were putting coal in all the children's stockings.
Yeah, I'm up to no good.
Yeah, Tamara Leach, 49, asked Ontario Superior Council, Superior Court Justice, the Honorary John M. Johnston, to overturn a ruling made by a lower court judge, Ontario Court Justice Julie Bourgeois, that Leach can be held without a bail. And is there anything more mimetic than the fact that the justice who is trying to jail
Judge Bourgeois,
member of the ruling class, my God.
It said the working class trucker organizer cannot be released
for mischief.
For protesting her worker conditions. Judge Bourgeois.
I know. Seriously, there are people, though, still trying to bring this to people's attention. If we go along, there's a video here that I've seen on Twitter where there are people outside of the court of the Canadian consulate, activists against mandates, gather and chant "Free Tamara Leach." I don't need to play it; it's only like 10 seconds long. But yeah, they are still out there trying to, get her out on bail at least. And the comments are full of absolutely hateful people who, of course, want to put the flags in their bios or in their names so that they can look like they actually care about something and care about people. All making fun of these people, all saying that this woman is a joke and that she could get jailed for 10 years. There was no trucker protest. It was an insurrection. I hate people sometimes.
I'm a socialist. That's why people who protest and organize should be arrested for 10 years.
Yep, I know.
Okay, Tsarist.
The whole point seems to be, why worry about domestic tyranny when there's something going on over there? We just need to keep sleepwalking into allowing our rights to be gradually stripped off us. And it's ridiculous. It's awful. And we need to return to England as well. I'll try and speed through because we're going over time. There are people, other NPCs, such as David Lammy, talking about how we need to basically remove all visa restrictions for any refugees or anybody fleeing Ukraine or that area because, just uncritically letting any refugee in at all has worked so well for us in the past. There's more people, let more in if you move along. UK government, Johnson says we're out in front on refugees. Patel defends the indefensible badly, talking about how Patel has said, hey, maybe we should have some criteria for the people that we're letting into the country. Just a little bit. 11,000 likes. Indefensible position.
We can help them in Poland.
There is even a letter being written against Priti Patel that has been signed by, as far as I can tell, when I first looked at it this morning, 116,000 signatures. John, let's see how many that's got. The UK must give safe passage to those fleeing war in Ukraine. 116,000 signatures. But the thing is, refugees are welcome over here. Priti Patel has said herself that, move along, this article for some reason says refuses to open UK's doors to meet Ukrainians fleeing war, but she said herself family members of British nationals who are not usually eligible will be allowed to come to the UK for up to 12 months as long as they pass security checks. You're trying to keep all those refugees out.
How dare you try and make sure that the person coming is actually Ukrainian and not just jumping into Ukraine to get past the borders.
I know.
I love how literally the first line as well is Home Secretary says she will take 100,000 Ukrainians seeking refuge.
No, she's refusing them. She's just going to let the boat rock up to the shoreline and then she's just going to push it back.
Not that it seems to make much sense, though. As I said, it's I don't know why we've forgotten things that we learned from the last crisis on this regard, which is help Poland.
Well, because the progressives, they always just want it to be our problem. They don't like to look at any... It's ironic because the people who I would describe as progressive and complain about things being Eurocentric or Anglocentric are the most Anglocentric when it comes to how we solve the problems.
This is the only place on earth worth living.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Everywhere else is a literal hellhole, even France.
I agree.
Very based.
I agree, but there are limits. And we just need to remember as well that the ruling class will never let a crisis go to waste because while this has all been going on, Calvin points out that the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Bill passed on Monday night. The House of Lords previously removed the draconian measures to restrict the right to protest, but the House of Commons put these clauses back in and pushed the bill through while everybody was distracted by Ukraine because nobody's going to be paying attention to these sorts of things, especially you mentioned the other day on the podcast as well, the digital currency that's being brought in. Nobody's going to pay attention to this while the media is whipping them into a frenzy about Ukraine. And we should care about what's happening in Ukraine to a certain extent. We need to stay informed on these things, but don't let it distract you from the fact there are things domestically, whether in Canada or the UK, going on in the Anglosphere that we still need to stay very, very aware of.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this interview with Gavin Bobby by Bo, and this you may better know as Mosque Busters on the encroachment of Islam. So please do sign up to get access to that, because of course that one is premium. And if you want to follow us for more content, of course you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.